Hello, everyone, and welcome to another inspiring session with the Agency Collective. I'm your host, Daniel de la Cruz. I'm really excited about this particular speaker feature today, and I believe my conversation with this person started sometime in October last year. I would argue perfect timing, actually, because not only did I get a chance to meet one of the greatest agency advisors in the world, but also managed to persuade him to do not just one talk, but also two talks for us. And Blair, I hope you would think I didn't take much persuading with our epic community, but without further ado, welcome Blair Enns.
Thank you very much, Daniel. It's my pleasure to be here with you, and I'm really looking forward to joining you and your members in London and Edinburgh in September.
Fantastic. Yeah, very much looking forward to that. So let's go a little bit into the story, right? So what's your story, Blair? A lot of people know the name, a lot of people know your story, but there's also probably quite a few people that don't. So what I'd like to understand a little bit more is your career history and what got you starting your business, Win Without Pitching.
Yeah, I think my career history is just a succession of failures. So it's a kind of a failed in my academic, not career. I was academically expelled from a very low rate university after 1 year.
What did you do? You gotta.
Well, it's more like, what didn't I do? I'm not a very good student. It's funny because I'm a lifelong learner, and if you look at my bedside table, I probably have like between 15 and 20 books stacked up, like in the reading queue.
Yeah.
So I'm always reading, and I'm always reading multiple books, and I love to learn. I just can't sit still in a classroom and be lectured at. And the irony is, I spend a lot of time lecturing people in classrooms now. So academically, post-secondary education I didn't do very well at it. I did take a 2-year business diploma program at a community college over here in Canada where I live, and I crammed that 2-year program into 3 years and just barely graduated. In fact, I was a credit short, and I had to talk the dean into giving me a credit for some extracurricular stuff I had done so that he could be free of me. And then I stumbled into advertising. I kind of stumbled into advertising, and I look back on it now and I think, yeah, it's probably fate. When I was in 8th grade, I don't know how that translates in the UK, but so I would have been 13. I won the school-wide oratory contest. So you had to write a speech, you had to stand up and give a speech, and the topic was on advertising when I was 13. So I guess there's no coincidence that I ended up in advertising.
You set the fate. You definitely set the fate.
Yeah. So I like to say I worked for some of the largest ad agencies in the world and some of the smallest design firms in the world, because the first agency I worked for was a full service marketing communication firm that did advertising, public relations, and design. And they even had a media monitoring business. And they worked for big and small corporations, not-for-profit entities, and government departments. So it's like everything for everybody. And I was at a very young age, my boss said to me, "Hey, you seem to be fearless. I'm going to put you in charge of new business." So I'm 22 years old. I barely know what I'm doing, and he puts me in charge of new business. And I didn't light it up per se, but I got some early wins, and I learned some tricks. So fast forward, I spent like a dozen years in the agency business. Yeah. And then really the honest genesis of Win Without Pitching, which was originally a consulting practice and is now a training company, the honest genesis was I discovered this remote mountain village in the middle of British Columbia, Canada, and it's where I'm speaking to you from now. And I just fell in love with this tiny little village in the middle of nowhere, and I wanted to move there. I wanted to move my family there. We just had our oldest child, who's now 24, he was 9 weeks old at the time. So I discovered this village, and I thought, I got to find a way to get there. So skipping ahead a little bit, I was fired from a job at one of the world's largest ad agencies. See, recurring theme of failure. And then we ended up moving to this little remote mountain village, and I needed to find a way to earn a living. So it was either buy the local fly fishing shop and be in the retail business. And I don't have the best bedside manner, so I'm probably not somebody who's cut out for retail or start a consulting company. So I launched Win Without Pitching just because I needed to find a way to earn a living from here. And I had done new business, and in the last job I had, my boss signed me up for a sales training program without asking me. And then he said, I hope you don't mind. And I said, yeah, that's great. I've been doing new business for a few years now. And I've only ever learned via osmosis from the people who've come before me, how they've done it. So I went through some sales training, and I was immediately struck by I was no longer afraid of the word sales, because I used to think of it as talking people into things. So I kind of learned to embrace that word, and I learned that, there's some rigor here. There's some structure that really isn't being used in the creative professions. We as marketers, we tend to look down our noses at selling. So I wanted to elevate sales. And so the genesis for Win Without Pitching came, and I launched the practice in 2002, early 2002. And then my first book, The Win Without Pitching Manifesto, came out in July of 2010. And in 2013, the very beginning of 2013, I shifted from a consulting company to a training company.
So that's quite interesting. So it started off as more sort of classic new business consultancy, I would assume. And how was talk me through your first clients and that as well, especially given the location you were at.
So 2002, April 2002, the internet was still a relatively new thing. So what I did when I decided I was going to start this consulting practice, I kind of sat down and I wrote out everything I knew. And so it ended up being a book, like in a manual form. And I sold that book on my website for $1,000 a copy. And I was just trying to codify what it is, or document and codify what it is that I knew. So and then I realized, well, I've got a book, so I'll charge $1,995 for it. And I put it on the website. And then I thought, okay, now I've got to start marketing this. Nobody knows who I am. So I found an organization kind of like the Agency Collective. It's called the Second Wind Network. I don't know if it's still around or not, in North America. And they had a list of all their members with email addresses of the presidents of the agencies with links. And I just click send, click send. And I sent 30 emails. And then I checked my inbox, and I'd had 15 replies. So the short answer is, I was lucky to start my business in the early days of kind of business accepting the internet, using the internet, where my response rates were 70%, 70. So wow. I might just try that on. And B, there weren't a lot of competitors. There weren't a lot of people doing what I was doing. Or if there were, they were really difficult to find. Yeah. So behind every successful business, there's a whole bunch of luck. And my timing was perfect. I got lucky. I'm sorry, I've forgotten what your question was, but that's kind of
I was interested in those kind of first clients, but that kind of tells the story of how you got there. And I bet you wish you knew everything you knew about pricing, creativity, and pricing back in those first early days when the demand was at that point and little supply, with all the coaches and non-execs and stuff that are floating around these days.
I wish I knew about pricing today. I wish I knew what I know today. I wish I knew it 18 months ago when the book came out, because I feel like I know 50% more than what is in the book now. Now that the book's been out, and we'll talk about the book in another conversation, but the book's been out for 18 months, and I've traveled the world a couple of times and had lots of conversations and done lots of training and done further reading. I feel like I know at least 50% more than I did when that book came out 18 months ago. So yeah, when I think back to 17 years ago, I knew nothing, Daniel. I knew nothing.
What a great journey. Why Win Without Pitching? What's behind the title? What was the motivation? Talk me through that.
I always hated the pitch. I have a high power score, so I have a high need for authority and respect. And I always hated being in this position where I felt like I wasn't like in a sale where I was just one in a sea of many, and the client had all the power and they used that power to push me around. And I was in a new business call. I was running new business for an agency. I was running a remote office for an agency, and my boss, the president of the firm, came out into the market where I was based, and he and I were going on a few meetings, and we had a pretty good meeting with a prospective client. And at the end of the meeting, the client said, "Okay, you guys seem great. Why don't you come back with some ideas on how you can help us?" Like he wanted some concepts. And I was fed up. I just heard that too many times. And I looked at him and I said, "No, we never pitch." And at the same time I said that, my boss, who was sitting next to me, said, "Okay." And so
I
we
love
kind
it.
of looked at each other, and I forget how we got out of the situation. And afterwards he said, he was a great guy to work for. He said to me, hey, I don't mind this approach that you're taking. I just, I'd like to know in advance."
Love it.
So I just started pushing back, and I didn't really have much of a methodology for how, but I kind of fumbled my way through some successes.
Yeah.
And then it's funny, you learn enough to think, okay, maybe I could become a consultant. So you write out what you know, you start giving people advice. And I thought the moment I transitioned from doing this to advising others, I thought, okay, well, the learning is over. But that's not true at all. As soon as you start advising others, your learning actually picks up because you learn through your clients, right? So if you're working with 5 clients and you're advising them on 5 different things, or even the same thing, they come back with the feedback on what works and what doesn't. So, for the first few years, I would be giving my clients advice, and they would come back and go, "Oh my God, it worked." And I would say, "It did?"
Love it. When you said you transitioned, so are you referring to the fact that you were sort of more of a new business consultant initially, and then you transitioned over to a more sort of, I guess, what would be called like a professional training company? Is
Yeah.
that what you're referring to?
Yeah, and the genesis for that was when I was exploring value-based pricing. I realized that I had made kind of a classic mistake. I'm not sure if I'd ever seen anybody articulate this before, but it became clear to me that there are customized services businesses and there are productized services businesses, and then there are product businesses as well. And in a productized services business, in a customized services business, every engagement should be a blank slate of opportunity. It should be a creative act. You should really craft that engagement to the client. And you would have a small number of clients at any one time, and each engagement would be crafted specifically to the goals of the client. And then I learned, the pricing of those engagements should be specific to the client. It's the first rule in my book, Pricing Creativity, is price the client, not the service or the job. So as I kind of explored that and became aware of these concepts, I realized, I'm a customized services business, but I've productized my services, and I had standard products and standard services. And that only makes sense when you're pursuing scale, not necessarily infinite scale, but if I were building a company of hundreds of clients, that would make sense for me to say, like the shelf behind me, I've got these different products on the shelf and they all cost set prices. Which one makes the most sense for you?
Yeah.
And so the culture of a customized service business is completely different from a productized service business. Mine was customized, but I had quasi-productized. I was caught in the mushy middle. And I realized, and I see in digital firms, this problem is pervasive. You see it a lot, and you especially see it in the HubSpot ecosystem, HubSpot partner agencies, because they HubSpot's great at giving advice to their partners. So these agencies tend to look to HubSpot for lots of guidance, and they look at how HubSpot packages, prices, and sells. And even though HubSpot hasn't said to them specifically, you should do it this way, they're doing it this way. So they're making a mistake and they're violating the first rule of pricing. So, and I was doing that too. And I realized I have to pick one. I have to productize and pursue scale, hire people, build training programs, etc., have set products at set prices, or I have to fully customize, become a proper consultant, and start to value price my engagements and create every engagement as a creative act and structure it to the client rather than what was easy for me to deliver. So I could have chosen either, and I chose to productize, maybe because I felt like, well, I've already done the customized services. And also because where I live, it's really hard for me to get anywhere. So I felt like I couldn't say to a client, okay, I'll be there the day after tomorrow. Like if something came up and they needed me to be on site, it's not easy for me to get on site. It's easy for me to get to London as it is to get to most places in North America. And
Well,
that's
how
not
would
easy.
you, in your context then, how would you say, like, if you give me a really practical example of a difference between a service that you're offering now, which is a product, versus something that you might have been doing in the past, which was more of a custom solution, essentially, for each customer.
Sure. So we have workshops, 2-day workshops that have a set price and set agendas. We have on-site training in 1 and 2 days, and they have set prices and set curriculum. We have remote training programs that have set curriculum and set prices, and we don't do peer groups anymore. That's changing, but we private training, and then we have one-on-one coaching and set pricing, set structure and set pricing. And we don't publish the prices on our website. We could, but we don't. But if somebody comes to us and says, I have this business development challenge, can you help me? We think of it in terms of the product. And the reason is we're pursuing scale. I don't do coaching. I don't do all the training. I still do some training, even though I'm slowly getting out of that. And we're able to train coaches. So all of our coaches have at least 10 years experience. They were all trained by me more than 10 years ago when they were clients of mine. And so we have this ability to kind of replicate and pursue scale. So we have about 100 clients now, where I used to work with 3 or 4 clients at a time.
That makes sense.
And in theory, we could have 1,000 or 10,000 clients.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Let's take it a little bit away from work right now. Tell me about the Blair outside of work.
There isn't much of a Blair outside of work these days. I've taken some time off this summer, and I'm taking a lot more time off coming up. So I live in this beautiful remote mountain village called Caslow, British Columbia, Canada. It's a short 10 or 11-hour drive from Vancouver, if you know British Columbia, on the shore of a 92-mile.
I love how everything is short in Canada and America. Like, we just pop to the shops, 11-hour drive.
Yeah. And so I love being outside. I've got 4 kids. The youngest is now 17, so they're all kind of grown and don't really need me or much from me. My wife and I do a lot of hiking, biking, kayaking, a lot of outdoor stuff. So I feel like I live 2 lives. I feel like I'm here in Caslow. This is the real world. And then I go out into the matrix.
I love that. Yeah, I totally get that. I think it's really interesting. I went climbing a mountain with a Canadian girl earlier in the year, and she used to tell me loads about Canada and like how amazing is there. Also the backcountry skiing being quite a big thing. Do you do any of that?
I'm not a backcountry skier. I skied en piste with my kids till they no longer needed me. But we live in the heart of backcountry skiing country. In fact, cat skiing was invented basically right up the lake from us. So there's a lot of heli skiing operations and cat skiing operations.
Love it.
Where you take this big kind of tractor into the backcountry and then ski out. So it's really big around here.
Yeah. Well, you're going to have to invite all of us over one day and do a really big agency collective party.
If you can find me, you're welcome to come visit.
Love it. What fascinates you about working with agency owners specifically?
At my heart, I'm a creative person, even though I always worked on the business side in the agencies that I worked in. I'm a writer. I've always seen myself as a writer. I have a soft spot for creatives. I just love being in a room full of creative people. I love the way they think, the inspiration, and I love how creative people were put on this earth to create, and maybe all people were put on this earth to create. I'm not sure, but I know, those creative people who recognize that in themselves. It's not. Sure, it's a business, but it's a calling first, and I just love being with those people. And I've just decided years ago that all I'm going to do is help those people in their what I see as their most vulnerable moment. And their most vulnerable moment is when the creator decides to build a business and didn't really sign up for all the business stuff, in particular the selling stuff. They don't see, or he or she doesn't see themselves as a natural salesperson. So they're standing up in front of a room trying to sell something that's highly personal. There's a sense of rejection. It's a very vulnerable moment for creative people. And we've just built this business to help that person in that moment. And
Yeah.
I just love creative people. I don't know why.
And having read through your books and knowing you, I think what I really like is, as well, as your approach to looking at almost containing that, or maintaining that creativity and that sort of side, the artistry side of things, as you often refer to it as well, and then actually looking at the business side and going, look, we can't be afraid of the word selling. We can't be afraid of talking about money. All of these sort of elements that come quite unnatural to most creatives, and probably to most human beings as well, actually, when you look at it generally in the world. But when you're running a business, you are running a business, and therefore, it's important to look at things and look at certain metrics that then show you that actually what you're doing is right in some way, regardless of whether the driver is the money or not, right? That's a whole kind of separate conversation. But so I really like that. Is there a type of agency that or type of person, creative person, that you particularly like working with?
I'm not sure. I came mostly out of advertising, although with some experience in the design world. And I thought when I was building Win Without Pitching that our primary client would be ad agencies, but that's never been the case. We work with a lot of ad agencies, but they're more design based. And as time goes by, they're more, as design is converging with digital and consulting, the lines are really blurry, right? So some of our clients feel more like consulting firms, some feel more like software engineering firms, some feel more like design firms. There are very few pure ad agencies left, although there are still some, and we do work with some ad agencies, including some large ones. I really like designers. And that, nothing against everybody else, but just, I always say a designer wants to solve the problem and save the world. And that's one of the things I love about design. Solve the problem, save the world. And even if it's just a small part of it, in every designer I know, I think there's a part of them that has a sense of altruism and philanthropy and higher mission and purpose that I didn't experience myself when I worked in advertising. And I'm not saying that folks who work in advertising don't have that sense of higher mission or purpose, but I've never met a designer who didn't have that. And so I just like being around them. And if they've decided to take this risk and build a business, I just love the opportunity to help them succeed in that business.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it as well. Are there kind of agency owners or types of agencies, apart from, I guess you didn't really say that you don't like working with ad agencies, but I guess what I'd be interested in is are there elements maybe of working with agencies that you say, for fuck's sake, I'd love this to be that way, or this actually really frustrates me. Like that would probably be more the better way of putting that question.
I think any frustrations that I've had have just been this sense that haven't we had this conversation like 10,000 times? And we haven't had I've had the conversation 10,000 times, but not with that one person. And maybe in my younger days, there were things that frustrated me, but I don't know. I really appreciate, I love entrepreneurs too. Anybody who decides to like take this calling and try to turn it into a business, man, you're taking on a whole bunch of risk. And even though the patterns are quite similar and people face the same challenges over and over again, I don't find myself being frustrated by those challenges. I don't coach anymore, and I learned the hard way that I have a team of coaches that are great at it. I'm not the best kind of patient person at somebody who we agree what needs to be done, and they can't bring themselves to do it. And that's not, I struggle with that in some parts of my life too, but I'm not. So I've had moments of frustration, and I've had some clients call me out on it. In fact, one guy once, the final straw for me was a guy said to me, Blair, there's a fine line between coaching and abuse. And it's kind of funny, you can laugh about it, but he was
Yeah.
bang on, he was right. And I had to kind of take a look in the mirror and ask, like, why am I taking out my frustration on somebody else's challenges, his business? He's taking all the risk. It's not fair to him. So I've handed over coaching to people who are more empathic than me.
I find that really interesting, because it was a lot about your own ambitions in life, and how you go around life basically trying to make other people as ambitious as you are, and I think that's a really delicate line sometimes, because the reality is not everyone can be as ambitious as some other ambitious people, and then as well the level of, well, where does the ambition end? Where does perfection end? Where does it start? I think it's a very, very interesting area to discuss. Do you know what? I could really go into so many little details of you, but I do want to bring it back as well to the talk that you're going to do for us in September. We are very, very excited about it. It's going to be in 2 locations. So we've got you coming to London on the 11th of September and to Edinburgh on the 12th of September. In London, the talk is going to be about pricing creativity. And then in Edinburgh, you're going to talk about the lyrically labeled talk, Blairtopia. What should attendees of these 2 talks expect?
Pricing creativity, I expect you to be able to leave that talk with a handful of principles and rules that can help you to make more money immediately. So that should be very lucrative from the attendee point of view. If you've already bought Pricing Creativity, my book, and you're applying those principles, maybe we'll just clarify some things, and hopefully you're already making more money.
I'm going to do a little
there we go.
A little pass-by plug. It's brilliant. Actually, in fact, I don't know if I'm going to be able to capture that exact line that you've got in there now, and I probably won't. But you actually had a very, very good metric in there in terms of like the percentage of profit increase that.
Yeah, I think the average agency owner can increase profit by 50% just by following some of the rules in the book.
Yeah, which is incredible. Absolutely incredible. Yeah. So we're going to hear you talk about pricing creativity and share all the insights from that. And obviously the book is fantastic as well. We'll have a separate feature on that as well, where we'll deep dive into that. And obviously I highly recommend it, because it has so much really good practical advice. What I really like about it as well is that it's a lot of kind of experts that I know that write books tend to often write from their perspective and their experience. And what really touched me by reading the first few pages of the book is that you've spent a lot of time sort of showcasing all these people that contributed towards it. And I guess what that shows is that you're not just I guess sort of saying, okay, well, this is all based on my experience of working with agencies, but actually I've researched all these people and spoken to so many people and questioned almost your own experiences and validated those. So I think that's a really, really great way of writing a book. So you know that you're going to get the best of the best, right? So I'm excited about talking a little bit more about that, and obviously hearing you talk on that. The Blairtopia one. So talk us through that.
I'm going to tease the audience a little bit, not tell you too much about it, other than to say it's my favorite talk. I've given it only about 10 times in the last 5 years. And it's really meant for business owners. It's a series of constraints-driven exercises where I will introduce a constraint and you will try on the idea of what it's like to run your business under this constraint. And your first reaction to each constraint will be, well, that's not possible. I can't do that. And then as you think through it and we work through it, you'll see that not only is it possible, but you will build a better firm from operating under this constraint.
I'm just holding on to the table where my laptop is sat on. Well, you're all going to have to wait till the 12th of September to hear this talk, and I'm really looking forward to that. One last question I've got for you. You speak to a lot of agency owners, you come across a lot of experts as well, and generally have quite a good observation of the industry around the world. What sort of trends do you see kind of popping up at the moment on the horizon that you would say are really important for agency owners to be aware of?
I would say the biggest trend that I'm thinking about right now is the convergence of design, tech, and consulting, and the how consulting firms are getting into the agency space, ad agency and UX, and also, yeah, UX and digital design space. And so the big thing that I'm thinking about is the idea that agencies really need to position themselves in some way as creative consultants, because again, the services are overlapping, but typical business consultants, they think about problems and they attack problems differently than we do, those on the creative side. So creative problem solving is really about thinking about the problem differently. And that is one of our superpowers. And that is something that we need to learn to leverage more. So I would say, if I fast forward 10 years, I would say the competition is even more intense between firms that align to one of these three different circles of design, digital, or tech, and consulting. And you're going, even if you see your firm in just one of those right now, you're going to be competing increasingly with firms in those other circles, and you're going to experience more and more hybrid firms. And you really need to think about the idea of starting to solve business problems that you haven't typically been asked to solve to date. And to compete against consultants, you don't want to be more like them. In a couple of ways you do, but you really want to leverage how you are different from consultants. And that is really essentially how you attack the problem, this ability to think differently about the problem.
It's an interesting one, and I guess just so in a really simple example, what consultants of consultancies used to probably do a lot more is looking at the numbers and looking at certain areas of a business and go, right, is this profitable? Is this not profitable? What are we doing? Are we getting rid of that? Are we getting rid of that? What's happening in the market? And therefore, oh look, we could probably do that as well, or so on. And it's traditionally, yeah, definitely less a creative process. So I am very excited about the whole movement of consultancies coming in and going, oh, maybe we should actually start talking to these super creative people that look at something and bring two things totally, from totally unrelated areas together and suddenly come up with something that's really useful. Yeah, I love that. Great, excellent. So that's the end of our speaker feature. I'm really looking forward to hanging out more with you over the next few weeks up to lead up to the event, doing the features around the books. So for everyone that's listening right now, look, if you're an agency owner who just started your agency, or you've been going for a while and you want to understand how you get to the next level, or you might be a relatively big agency and are just looking to scale now to the next level as well, you will find these talks super useful. Again, the events are on the 11th of September in London and 12th of September in Edinburgh. Get those in the calendar right now. In terms of tickets, what you can do is I'll just blend in a moment the Eventbrite pages. So you can go to our Eventbrite page and buy them from there directly. Please be aware that we've got a limited amount of tickets, especially for the London one for non-members, because our members generally get priority on that. And I know with Blair coming to London, we are definitely going to be a seller on this. So if you want your tickets, make sure you get in there quickly. As an Agency Collective Growth member, you get a free ticket. So if you're interested in becoming a member, then we can talk about that as well separately. Also keep an eye out further for the things that we're going to cover. So we're going to talk about the Win Without Pitching Manifesto in the next few weeks, and also a pricing creativity book. So for those of you that are interested in getting a little bit of a teaser of those books, definitely tune in. But thanks a lot again, Blair, for your time. on this, and I really look forward to hanging out with you over the next few weeks.
Likewise, Daniel.